What about the lunch break of an event about online neighbourhood networks with Kevin Harris and Hugh Flouch, who've been presenting the results of their research, and also with Debby Matthews, and we first met up back in the mid-1990s, so it's an interesting time to revisit how things have moved on since then. Who's going to give me a first scan of the research results? Hugh?
Well, this morning what we've been doing is talking about the first half of the research, if you like, which is how these websites are building up social capital in neighbourhoods. And Kevin was talking about the increase in sense of belonging, neighbourness. I don't know if you want to pick that up, Kevin.
Yeah, there's certainly evidence that the participation in these sites is contributing social capital at local level. People are more connected with one another, they meet one another, and they contribute to supporting the neighbourhood and getting involved in the neighbourhood as well.
I think you had a great quote on there, somebody saying, well, I didn't know the neighbours until I went onto the online site.
And you can see the logic of how that happens, because you can go onto the site without anybody knowing you're there, but they give information which people share, and you find out about others, give you opportunities to meet and exchange favours and so on.
They also allow you just to watch what's going on, and I know it's called lurking, but it actually does allow people to hear and listen, a bit like standing at the bus stop. You can sort of find out about things without necessarily having to have an opinion or know anything about it. You can just sort of listen along.
And Debbie, you've been involved in rural community councils more recently,
yes.
I think around South London, community activities. What are you seeing broadly in the field?
I think at the moment there's still an emphasis on face-to-face meetings, forums and networks, and that's how people meet and talk to each other around the voluntary and community sector. And what we're looking at now is really about how neighbourhoods work and whether neighbourhoods use those traditional voluntary and community groups and meet together and discuss things, or whether they're looking to finding new ways of doing that through neighbourhood forums and this sort of online community. Because it does feel a little bit new in some areas, and certainly in South London I'm not aware of very many that are going at the moment, so it would be quite interesting.
And Hugh, you're actually doing this in Haringey. What's the fine-grained experience of how these sites contribute to the life and vitality of a neighbourhood?
I think in terms of how they contribute to the life and vitality, the evidence that we have in Haringey very much backs up what's happening, the picture we found in the study. People making real connections. I think one of the things that emphasises that a lot of these connections are in the real world as well as online. It's not just about online. And the bit we're going to cover in the comments this afternoon is the implications for local councils. So we're going to look at how are councils and council laws using these sites, and what does it mean in terms of the relationships between local people and local councils. In fact, just to give you a preview, David, what we're finding is that these websites really are improving the relationships in a number of ways. And one of those is just improving the perception of various groups of public officials, whether that be councillors, police officers or council officials. And then we'll also be saying a word or two about future considerations. I don't know if you want to pick up on that, Kevin.
Well, one of the things that struck us is that local councils are far more interested in neighbourhood websites than we had expected. There's lots of interest out there, but what we found is that the barriers are actually quite significant. There are barriers like there is a lack of guidance internally within the authority. There are also perceived barriers about a number of the sites, the level of negativity, the danger of getting drawn into protracted and discordant conversations. Those are real barriers. And there is no single easily soluble barrier that would suddenly let this whole movement loose. It's quite complex, it needs a bit of work, but we're convinced that the benefits in terms of the citizen-state relationship are so strong that it's well worth pursuing.
I was just going to say as well, the role of the local authority member, the councillor, is quite an interesting one, because they could see themselves as the local resident representing their local area but through the democratic sort of structure, or they represent the council. And where they fit in a forum that's basically taking away any sort of hierarchy into the conversation is going to be quite interesting to see how they use it.
So quite challenging for members, but new opportunities for members, do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, the evidence that we have suggests there are significant opportunities for members when they feel comfortable with using it. One of the examples we're going to talk about today is Councillor James Barber, who's Lib Dem councillor from East Dulwich in South London, and he's finding it a wonderful way to find casework and to build very solid relationships with his local residents.